Okay, welcome everybody to meeting of the BNS working group. So over the past 2 weeks, we've had a bunch of discussion on the Stacks forum about a number of different possibilities of features to include in BNS 2.0 upgrade. Hank was very kind to put that together. And I think at least from my perspective, there's like several issues that either people don't have any interest in, and like they don't really care about it either way. And then there are like a couple issues that are like people have like strong opinions either for or against. And I thought that it would be useful for this call to do a couple things. So one of them is of course to discuss the contentious issues. That way, perhaps like with some back and forth, people can clarify a bit their understanding that you don't really get on a written medium. And the second thing that I thought it might be useful to do is to try to come up with a time frame so we can sort of say like, okay, after this time, we're gonna start like saying, okay, these are the features that we're going to like try to make a draft new contract in, and then is that way we can sort of move forward. And it probably just because I know that the it's going to get heated for the contentious issues. So maybe if we talk
Hello.
about like take a if maybe if we talk about time frame first while we're still like not all like revved up, then we can like sort of go full into like a free for all and like discuss what we want and like people can get okay. So so I would suggest I'm open to suggestions on this. But one of the things, like since we do have some contentious issues, I thought I'd throw out there is that maybe one thing we consider is taking all the non-contentious issues and like that and putting those into like an upgrade. And then like leaving the contentious ones off for a future like a revisit in the future. Just as a way to, because I know that like there's a lot of one of the comments that I saw raised repeatedly was like, hey, there's not been a lot of progress here. And like that would at least give us progress in like getting improvements to the system, and then we can talk about how to revisit the other things that we want later. Yeah. So do we any other thoughts on that?
That's interesting. I think that's certainly one approach. I would say one thing that I didn't make a forum post about because I wanted to sort of start with what would be in the upgrade and then later do how we do the upgrade. And so part of that is like the actual kind of contract deployment, how our names transferred across from the one contract to the other, is it a hard fork or not, that sort of thing. And within that is this question of like, should the contracts at all be upgradable? And there are various ways to do that. Obviously there's like DAO ways, there's like some sort of community voted multi-sig type of way. There's like using kind of like how SIPs are voted on via stacks and that sort of thing. And it's, I think none of those answers are going to be like easy or non-contentious. But if we did go with that path, then you have this really big benefit of like we don't have to settle everything now. But if the decision was made that they shouldn't be upgradable, and that basically just means future upgrades have to go through a similar process to this, and a similar amount of friction, as we'll see, of like actually changing the contract, moving names, updating apps, et cetera, et cetera. And so to me, whether we do this like some now versus some later approach kind of hinges on that, because it's just a big pain to do this whole big process, versus if we had a mechanism in place to say, hey, we've decided on this sort of voting mechanism, we're going to use that, then we'll still go through all the discussion and everything, but the actual kind of implementation is a lot less difficult.
Yeah, Larry, I totally agree with you on the approach of just taking like what's not controversial, what's kind of consensus, looking at that. And, several of you guys have been in Bitcoin for a long time, so you know that the general good ethos is to make everything, backwards compatible. It's usually preferable to do like the soft fork approach where it's, opt-in doesn't break anything. It's easier to implement. Any sort of hard fork, any sort of thing that's not backwards compatible is just should only be done in like an absolute emergency, or if there's like overwhelming proven consensus without any shadow of a doubt. So I really like that approach of let's just stick with what I think people like and there's not going to be an issue with, and the other stuff, let's just shelve it. Let's keep debating it. Let's keep testing it. I think that's a sane approach. So I support that idea.
Cool. Any other thoughts on that? Maybe since this is sort of like a new issue we haven't discussed before, maybe a next step for this issue would be to like start a discussion, like a written discussion about this, because I do think it's a very important issue. Nick, please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, hey everybody. Yeah, I think this is something that has long been a bit of like a frustration of mine, and I think many hundreds of others. I think for a few reasons. I think like while I don't want to get stuck in the past here, I do think it's worth mentioning that the reason that this one-to-one kind of system is in place is because of a unilateral decision made by one individual. And there's like GitHub history for this. Like I shared a link in the forum. You can see like many thoughtful discussions that were happening as to why we should stick with the original system, because it used to be the way that we want to make it again. And it was actually unilaterally switched by one individual despite like kind of outcry from others. I hope I'm not making it sound too sensationalistic here. That's not my goal. But and so
you can just name names. It was Jude. Jude did it.
Yeah, it was Jude. It was Jude.
asshole. I am CJ, bro.
Okay, well, this is why we don't have public meetings.
Okay.
And they're gone.
It's rowdy. Anyway, so I think that that like there's an argument there alone that like we should rectify what was a crazy like overreach of power that has led to a lot of pain and difficulty. And I think honestly there's a legitimate concern like from builders, and I'm speaking on the behalf of Gamma, but from others as well. I'm sure Hank can speak to this. It's a very difficult. All right. And it's difficult to build.
Apologies for this.
Yeah. As a result, and so. Yeah, so it's difficult to build on top of a protocol that is so rigid, and actually like one thing that's kind of funny is like it actually like reflects pretty poorly on the network. Like it looks like we're trying to feign statistics that are not true. Like I often see, oh, so many smart contracts have been deployed, that means Stacks is growing. The reality is they're all smart contracts that Gamma has to deploy on behalf of users, because the only way to sell names is by actually wrapping them in a smart contract. So I think like the reality is that Stacks is actually in a very like tricky position right now, and one that where it's not really growing and it's not advancing, and there is a world in which Stacks doesn't exist in a couple of years. I don't want that to be the case. And so I think that like anything that artificially limits growth, especially when it was put there by one individual, is just like something that we should get rid of immediately. So that's like just a general like precursor to some of my thoughts. And then I think there's also like specific, I guess, like responses that I would have to specific criticisms of like changing the system. So like I don't want to bore everyone with them if nobody is saying that. But like Ragnar, it sounds like you disagree. Like I would love to hear like the the specific things that that you like forget about like the we should not do a hard fork piece of this because we shouldn't be here to begin with. So I think that argument on both sides should be thrown away, and we should make a decision based on the merits alone. And so I'd love to hear like the specific reasons why, like either as a builder, it's a better building environment by keeping it the way that it is, or as a user, it's a better user experience the way that it is, or as like a principled participant in the network, there's a reason that we should like ignore a builder or user concern in support of a certain principle, which I'm not like. I hope my framing didn't sound like we shouldn't consider that. I think it's fair to do that. So anyway, yeah, I'd kind of love to hear your thoughts there.
Is that directed to
All right.
Ragnar?
Yeah. Is this to me, Nick?
Yeah. I mean, only because you said absolutely not. So oh, unless you were responding to letting people on the call, I'm sorry. I thought that might have been what I was saying. Okay.
Yeah, no, I disagree with pretty much everything you said, especially your premise. So I've been in Bitcoin since 2011, and I've seen the evolution of Bitcoin over time as the code base changes. I've seen what happens when there isn't consensus. I think there's a very, very good reason why Bitcoin doesn't do hard forks unless it's an emergency. And it's for the very reason that if it's not backwards compatible, you just completely deleted other people's ability to operate. So Bitcoin isn't a democracy. Stacks is not a democracy. This is a decentralized open source. Things should be opt-in. And so right now, if you want to have more than one name per address, that's great. You could opt into BNSX or not. So we have to agree on the general principle that we don't just vote out and the minority loses, or at least what is understood to be the minority. So I think we have to first decide that if we want to operate in the model of Bitcoin, or if we want to operate in the model of we're a company.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I would argue, and I'll let whoever just raised their hand speak as well. Like I think that what is being proposed does not conflict with what you said, because number one, it's not a hard fork of the entire Stacks network. I actually for a long time thought that was what would be required, and I was informed that like I had an incorrect assumption there. So that was actually like a nice thing to hear, that it doesn't require a whole hard fork of the network. So that's one piece. I think another is that like one of the things that like constitutes like a soft fork is that changes to the network can still allow prior actors to continue to act the way that they were. They just might have new things that happen that they don't understand. And meaning like the nodes or the software or whatever. And so I could be wrong. Like I'd love to hear from Hank like the specific implementation that they have in mind. Like, but I don't think in any proposal the original BNS contract would cease to work. I think it would just be a new contract that references the state of BNS v1.
I'm CJ, bro.
That introduces new functionality, for example, having multiple names in one address, and maybe BNS v1 wouldn't understand what's happening and would say, no, that shouldn't be possible, but it like otherwise would continue working for the people that don't subscribe to a new contract state. Is that correct, Hank?
That's my understanding as well. For a lot of reasons, I think that's the right approach, where there's a new contract, it's at a new address, similar to like how PLX2 and now PLX3 are new contracts. And so, it's just modifying like the actual code of an existing like contract is, contentious for a lot of reasons. I think it's the right approach. And so I agree with your point there that like the way that this works, if that's the assumption for how it's deployed, is that it is opt-in. And it's obviously important to like, I don't know, be together because, like if we want this new contract to be successful, obviously it has to be adopted. And if we end up with 10 different BNS contracts, then it's like, just worse for everyone. So anyway, to that point, I would say, I generally agree that it is, similar to Bitcoin in that sense where it's like, apps are, if there's like code bases that work with the previous BNS contracts, then, nothing will be broken once this new contract comes out.
Yeah, I understand that we're not going to hard fork the Stacks network. What I'm saying is we don't want a lack of consensus. And what you're saying about different versions of the contracts is a disaster. I mean, it would just be a disaster. I mean, people are going to be doing different implementations, thought they were doing one contract when they're doing the other contract. Why would you want to do that? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. And once a new contract is there, it's kind of there. It's like herpes. And so I think we should just start with what can we do today that will help people, that isn't contentious, that will have the least likelihood of there being conflicts, confusion. As someone who is building a identity and reputation app, which is what BNS is all about, it would be very bad if we had conflicts with other apps, especially if other apps are building on ours or calling our API. So my suggestion is, why don't we just start with what's an easy win? What do we all agree on? And start there, because the multiple names per address, it is contentious. And whether some people are speaking up or not, that's a different story. They DM me, they just don't want to, speak up what they think might be an unpopular opinion among some people. Obviously, I'm not that way. So my suggestion is, why don't we focus on what is like non-contentious, an easy win, and just get momentum there. Larry brought up like a lack of progress. So we do have that in mind. We also don't want to go too fast and break things, but we also don't want to like never get anything done. So I think what we can get done is things that are, easy and non-contentious. That's my take.
But Ragnar, are you suggesting? Guys. Go ahead.
Hi there. I just wanted to come at this from a user perspective, because I think having multiple names per address, I think for the average user using BNS and Stacks dApps in the future, it's just going to be a much more intuitive and seamless sort of experience for them. Whereas currently, obviously, what we've experienced with the current BNS core contract is that obviously we have to create a new address. We have to kind of go to the btc.us website. We have to then claim our name, or obviously buy a name from Gamma. And then each time we have to create a new address, we have to transfer Stacks to that new address and go through the same process. It's a sort of a rinse and repeat process. And that just creates friction for the average user. For the existing users that have, joined the Stacks ecosystem and have obviously very clearly been onboarded, have bought NFTs, etc., that process, even though it has, cost them time and money, they've still gone ahead with it and done it, and that's fine, because I guess in essence we're not the average user, but we need to think about this logically from the average user's perspective. We need to make this as frictionless as possible for them, and as uncomplicated as possible for them. And I kind of I'm not sort of technical, so I kind of agree with the backwards compatibility sort of aspect to it. That sounds pretty reasonable. But I think for Stacks and for Stacks adoption and BNS adoption, I think having multiple names per address, it just makes total sense. And I think BNSX has been a testament to that, because a lot of people have adopted that thus far. And there's a lot of positive comments being made about that as well in the community.
Well, you're getting ahead of yourself. First, we have to agree on a basic principle of how things are adopted and why. So that's a whole nother discussion about the pros and cons of multiple addresses per name. So that's, to me, we're not even at that point yet. I think we first need to agree on general principles.
Can I take another oh, go ahead. I was just want to look at this from a different angle, like instead of technically how it's implemented, like how people expect things to work. So in crypto we have wallets, and wallets have multiple things in them. You can't just put one Bitcoin in your wallet. You can put 2 Bitcoins or 3 Bitcoins. You can't just put one NFT. You can put 2 or 3. And then I get this. Actually, this way of looking at identity comes from my experience with adding them to Nostr, right? So like in Nostr, the identity is actually the public key that it's pointing at. The name is pointing at. It's totally irrelevant which name owns the name, right? And which address owns the name. That's just the wallet that it's in. But like the identity is what that name is pointing at. So you can point an infinite number of names at one given public key. And if you think about how DNS works, that's actually the same thing. Like my Cloudflare account can have multiple names in it. Like I can have 1 domain or 100 domains, and like what those domains identify are the servers that it points at. So like domain a.com can point at one IP address, domain b.com can point at another one. And that it allows you to like, it's just the way the world works, right? Like I as a person, I have multiple legal names. Like my ID card has 2 names on it. So just from my perspective, like it's insane that I can't, like both names can't be me, because I respond to both of the names and they're both my legal names. And like, so like, I guess I have a really hard time just understanding why it's even contentious. And besides, unless it's like a feature decision that you've made. I mean, I totally agree with you, like in terms of like, we don't want, like we want to have more people using as opposed to just speculating. But like the solution to increasing the cost of using names is to increase the cost of registering a name, not to like make it hard for developers and hard for users. If it's hard for me as a developer, I'm just going to go develop on something else. Like, I don't care. Like, if it's hard for me as a user, like, but if I can pay money, yeah, let's pay money. It's $100. It's worth it to me. I'll pay $100. Like, it just seems like I'm totally on board with you in terms of making this less speculative, but like, I just think that there are other ways. Like the way to do that is like cost. That's how markets work. Like actual monetary cost.
Now, the problem with the approach, I appreciate that, Larry, your thoughts. The problem with increasing the cost is that affects people who have a lower budget. So why should we make them pay more? Like that's not the way to throttle out of control speculation and set up bad incentives.
Yeah, unfortunately, that already happened.
One second.
Go ahead.
I'll let you finish.
Go ahead.
So again, I think we're getting ahead ourselves of talking about the pros and cons of that, which again, I think there are nuances. There are like real technical things to understand that require real testing, and like, hey, not just like philosophical, but like, let's get in there, let's code some things, let's try to connect our wallet and do different things. I think that is very, very a technical discussion that needs to be done with like real world utility, and see like, hey, this works, hey, this doesn't work, here's what we found, etc. So I think we're not even there yet to decide on that, but I think we should first agree on how we will agree. And right now, I think we're not there yet. So that's my sense. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I got tripped up on what I was going to say here.
I think it was basically, that it's already happening. Like,
oh, right. Yeah. The problem of like it allows, like a situation where some people have like a worse outcome than others. Actually, I think, like, in my opinion, we've caused that as a result of this restriction that we placed on the system. And so like what actually happened was the people that had the most persistence and the most money were basically just hoarding all of the network transactions. Like, they were jacking up fees so they could get their fees, their transaction confirmed first. They were doing all of these things, and that was because of the system that we have. So the system that we have caused them to Snazzy's point, like, you have to send money to a new address, then you have to set up that new address, then you have to connect that new address to a website, and you need to register the name and do the second transaction, and then you have to move, the funds back, or it's like a very complicated process. And so what happens is people like Larry, who are just like really like average good actors in the system, that like, I just want 2 or 3 names that represent who I am, or my communities, or the things that I care about. They are hurt because they have a lot of friction and don't want to go through the process of trying to figure out why this thing keeps failing, because you just see that it fails and you don't really understand why. Whereas the person who is like the degen trader, they will take the time to figure it out, and like they'll find a way. And so actually what happened was we've now sequestered hundreds of thousands of names, or at least tens of thousands of names, into addresses that will never be touched again, and will be forgotten about. And now those names are just like in a void somewhere, or they're going to charge exorbitant prices for those names because they went through so much effort to go and acquire them. So now they need to make more money to make it worth their while. So actually, like, I just don't buy the premise that the principled decision you're trying to make here, like you're making it for a reason that doesn't make sense, because there's like the theoretical, and then there's what happens in practice. And I can tell you for a fact, like with data, what actually has happened. And while I agree with you, it'd be great if we could just not have all this speculation going on and domain squatting. It simply doesn't prevent it.
It reminds me of, I don't know the perfect analogy, but like regulations that are well intentioned to, say only residents can own a house, or you can only own one house or something. And, and then it just ends up that the sophisticated people are the only ones who know how to kind of abuse the system. And then you end up with kind of like worse liquidity and like these weird edge cases. And I would agree with Nick that like the current limitations don't mean that there's not speculators, but it definitely means that there's less liquidity, and thus, it's harder to actually acquire a name that already exists.
Yeah, again,
like once a name's registered, it's gone. Yeah.
Yeah, again, I don't think we're there yet to even kind of do the pros and cons. I don't. I think we first need to agree on.
We are. That's what this call is. That's what this call is. It is the pros and cons. No, I will dispute that 100%. That is what this call is for.
Nick, there's 6 people here. We're trying to make decisions for thousands.
They blocked everybody else because they were annoying.
Well, I am speaking on behalf of thousands. I could give you thousands of tickets that we've received.
Well,
received. Like I'm not speaking just on behalf of my opinion.
I let you talk for a long time.
No, go ahead. I apologize. I keep interrupting. It's just I think like you're trying to dismiss a conversation because you don't agree with it. We're having the conversation. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
so you can say why you don't like it, but you're not going to shut it down anymore.
I'm not shutting it down. Okay. I'm trying to get a base.
Perfect. All right, I'll let you.
I'm
okay. Let's say like we get agreement if there are 5 out of 6 people agreeing on the call.
Yeah, six people trying to make a decision for hundreds of thousands of people. That is not even close to being enough.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily the truth, right?
Base level of what is how we say this is what people want and this is what people don't want, and we're not there. It's just 5 guys should say, well, there's 5 out of 6. No way. No.
This is the discussion.
What
it's
I
not.
Suggest is that do a test contract of how you would like it to work. Let's test it on testnet with various applications. Let different users, different apps use it. Try to use it with each other. Try to break it. And let's just make a very engineering approach and say, let's just test it and see. So let's start with that. And if we come back and say, hey, actually, you know what? This works. It doesn't have a problem. We've got that hurdle. Now that we've got the technical questions answered, now let's have the larger economic debate and stuff like that. But I think until we have real code that people can test across different apps, different users over time, different language barriers, I think people are just trying to push through something. And that is so not
No, I don't. I don't agree with that,
So we
Ragnar.
have to first listen. Until we can agree on how we agree, there's no point in debating this or that, and especially without code. Like, show me the code, let me test it, let other people test it. I don't see how that's contentious at all.
I agree with
what
those
about another-
aspects, Ragnar, but there is a large amount of consensus, I feel, towards this. I mean, all you have to do, and you have been, fairly active. I mean, you've probably been one of the most active people, I think, in the BNS DAO on this issue. But you're literally one of a very small handful of people that actually, want to remain with one address, one name per address. The vast majority of people in the community and users, people that are actually actively using BNS and, obviously using Gamma as well, they are absolutely on board with the multiple name to a single address idea. They've now they've tasted that fruit now with BNSX, and that's something that they are enjoying having, and using. My point previously, we're not the people that have already joined BNS and have been onboarded by BNS and have obviously, as Nick has pointed out, if you like, sort of hoarded in a way, a lot of these BNS names, and perhaps some individuals maybe wanting to charge exorbitant prices for them. We're not the average users, so we need to prepare BNS and Stacks really for the average user or the average person in crypto that wants a frictionless experience and that just wants to join the Stacks network and start using dApps and start buying some names, start buying some NFTs, all within the same address. They just need a very seamless, frictionless, uncomplicated experience. I honestly, as a user, I don't feel like that's illogical, to say that.
Yeah,
Ragnar.
again, you're repeating yourself, and that doesn't make any sense. First of all, I reject your assumption that I'm in the minority. Okay. Second, it doesn't matter because this isn't a democracy. This is Bitcoin. This is stocks. That's not how things work. Okay.
It's a consensus. Consensus, Ragnar.
Let's get some code.
I like to pull out a way of consensus that I heard from Ragnar that maybe will make sense. So what about if we like come up with a list of the non-consensus things we want, right? One list, and that's everybody's on board with that. And then we just have like if there are two consensus issues, if it's the .BTC price things and the multiple names, then we have two other versions of the smart contract that have that enabled or disabled, and then we can put them all on testnet. Like, is that we don't that's at least a step forward, right? And then we can see.
I mean, who's going to build it? Like, Ragnar, are you going to build all three contracts? Like, that's the challenge here, is that we have to live in the real world. Like the real world is that the network is going to die if we don't advance. I cannot state that enough. All of our principled debates mean nothing if the network is dead, and the network will be dead in a couple of years if we don't make smart decisions that will grow the network. Ragnar, you can laugh, but it's the reality. Now, Bitcoin, I don't think that's going to be dead. Stacks is already doing something experimental. And if we can't give users what they want, and yes, it is the majority of users, Ragnar, we can do an on-chain poll if we really want to know. I don't think you want to see the outcome of that, because you don't. That's why you switched to
exactly.
It's not a democracy, because like basically every argument you've changed your argument. When we said the majority want it, you say it's not a democracy. When we didn't say that, you said not everyone actually wants it. When we said we should talk about how it will be implemented, you said, I don't even agree we should be talking about this. And when we said, okay, well, we do think we should be talking about it, you said, go deploy contracts on testnet and we'll try it out. So you jumped around from argument to argument with no basis. It's clearly a principled belief, and that's okay. You can admit it's just a principled belief and it has no other technical basis. That's okay. like I have a principled opinion that it should be this way, but I also have arguments that are like on behalf of users that have spoken up, and on behalf of the builder's experience, and on behalf of the consensus of the network. So it's like I will say my personal belief is that we should move there because I want accessibility for all. But there's also very pragmatic reasons that we should do it. I've only heard principled reasons from you.
Okay, so can I ask I don't want I want to like ask some actual questions to better understand Ragnar's position. Then Mark, I'll go quickly to you. So again, to Hank's suggestion was that you would have primary name and then like secondary names. So from an app's perspective, from the app that you're building, perhaps like you could just choose to only, we only pay attention to the primary name, and if your name's not primary, like it doesn't exist to us. In which case, that would seem to like give you the functionality you're looking for, and then but it would still allow people that want to, like it's sort of like your wallet, right? You have a bunch of cards in your physical wallet, but only one of them has a little window where you put your ID, right? So you put your ID that you want to be your primary ID, you put it to like the face goes through the clear plastic window, but then all the other IDs you just stuff in the other pockets. Like, is that? I mean, I understand your desire to raise the cost, and like, so I accept that, I understand that, and like, but does that address the other issues you have with it? Like a primary name versus like a default name.
Yeah, I think the proper approach, the responsible approach, is engineering first. So why don't we?
You always design before you engineer. That's like,
so
let's build the bridge before we design it.
That's fine. So Larry, like what you're talking about, or people have talked about, just put that. Let's put it on testnet, and let's try it out.
But I want to understand, like, so imagine I'm the one to build it. I want to understand the problems that I could potentially cause your app. I like this proposed feature, right? Like, so I need to understand the design constraints, and like I don't clearly understand them. I don't understand if there's a mechanism for your app to use the system so there's only one name. Like, does that solve your app's problem? If the answer is yes, okay. If the answer is no, okay, well then explain to why not, so I can understand it.
Yeah. So
like, otherwise I can't design it, right? I can't build it.
Yeah. So again, the default, if someone is proposing to make a change to an open source distributed blockchain,
you're talking about tone. You're talking about. You're saying I'm asking you. Assume we figure out how we agree. Like, your like design requirements. What system works for you?
Yeah. So I could think about that. But what's better is whoever.
That'd be super helpful.
Yeah. Okay. But whatever someone wants, like if you guys have a certain change, it's really on that person to code that up, that change they want to make, and then have it be tested across multiple apps, multiple people.
Absolutely. And Jude did not do that, and so we're trying to fix the bug and put the system back the way it was. That's how we look at it.
So let's have that call. Whatever the bug is that you want to fix and how it fixes and what's the implementation and what's the actual contract, that should simply be written and tested. Just say, hey, if it's so easy and it's so clear and there's so many advantages, awesome. I'm behind something that will make everything better. Absolutely. Okay. I'm building something. Okay. I'm building a reputation. So whatever you guys want that would be the new contract, simply pull that up and let everyone use it. I think that's a very reasonable, practical way.
Guys,
sure.
And can we let Mark speak?
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Mark wanted to talk. Yeah, please go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, hi guys. So I come at this from a completely different perspective than just about everybody else here. I'll explain why. Firstly, I'm completely new to BTC domains. I've only been in it a few weeks, maybe a month. I'm middle-aged. I'm non-technical. I have no clue about coding or anything. Okay, but what I do have is an ability to make things simple for people like me who might want to actually buy this stuff, get involved with this stuff, and do the stuff. So I had challenge after challenge after challenge trying to mint a domain name. Why? Because I didn't know how it worked. I had to join the DAO. Very helpful people there. Explain to me, you needed another wallet. How do you get the STX? How do you do it all? So my point would be, whatever we're doing, there's a very good saying, which is, will it make the boat go quicker? Will it help someone like me with a non-technical background get to the site and be able to mint what they need easily, simply, fastly, and get what they want? That's the point about all this. Okay, we can argue all the technical stuff, and I can't get involved in that because I don't know any technical stuff. But what I am coming at is from a perspective of the end user, the people that actually do this stuff. And it just needs to be simple. And at the moment, there are too many steps to get a domain name. How we change that or minimize that or reduce that would be useful for me, because I'm now telling other people what they need to do, where they need to go, how they need to get the stuff. All right. And it shouldn't need a guide or any information, or, you know, you shouldn't need to have to come to a Discord necessarily to get that. It should be just be self-explanatory. I had ENS domains. That was fairly self-explanatory. You got one, you needed another one, you just got another one. There's a few more steps. So if we can limit the steps, we'll make it easier, which will onboard more people who will utilize this. I understand people are worried about squatting. I understand people are about worried, all sorts of things. But you know what? You're never going to stop speculation. You're never going to stop squatting. You're never going to stop people doing this stuff. But what you are going to get is more people who just want to get something quick, fast, and easy. That would be where I would be coming from.
I don't think there's disagreement. No one wants to make it like more difficult than necessary. No one wants to add unnecessary friction that actually prevents things. But we have to take an engineering approach first. We have to have code to test. So we want to make it better, and it's subjective what better is, but let's just get some code. If someone wants to make a change, it's on them to write the code and test it. That's like the default.
But here's my point, Ragnar. Here's my point. Okay,
we agree that it should be better, but we have to take an engineering approach. That it has to be tested.
Listen,
over and
I totally understand that the technical side of things needs to be implemented. I get that. I'm coming at it from a user perspective. I try to mint this stuff, do this stuff. I'm non-technical. It wasn't easy for me. That's my point. It needs to be easier, simpler, and faster. Whatever the end consensus is that creates less steps and easier for an idiot like me to get one, that's where you need to think.
No one disagrees with making BNS better. That's why we're here. That's why Hank made multiple sections to improving BNS, multiple. And so we're all here to make it better. It's just the contentious ones, especially, needs rigorous testing.
Okay, so let's we're a little bit over time now. And I mean, I have about 15 minutes before I have to go to bed. I would like to so we've really hashed out the multiple names, and also we need to decide how we're going to agree. Understand those 2 points. Duly noted. People in the video will see it. But we haven't talked about the .btc pricing contentious issue, which I thought I think would be useful to hear people's thoughts on that. I don't personally have a ton of thoughts on it, but I'd like to see if anybody on the call does and wants to talk about those. I mean, maybe Nick would be a good person to start if you have any thoughts. No thoughts?
I don't have too much of an opinion on anything else. It kind of sounds like from your opening and from just now, it sounds like most people don't have too much of an opinion on any of the issues other than this one. I feel like that's the kind of thing that is handled best asynchronously, because if there's no debate or there's no strong opinions, there's nothing really to be said. But
can I just ask one thing about the pricing? And again,
Sure,
forgive
yeah,
me,
no,
I
I'm
come at
sorry, I
this
didn't realize.
without knowing anything. Okay, is there a way that there can be a small increase, but that increase goes towards a fund for marketing or for doing something, representing us at a stand, at a conference, some sort of tools to help market this project? Would that make sense?
I agree, Mark. Yeah. I mean, in terms of I mean, at the moment it's 2 stacks, which is, gosh, like $1.50 or something. You know, per BTC name. I think for BNS V2, I think it could be a good idea to potentially have the amount stated on the website in dollars, and then maybe give the user a choice to pay in stacks or SBTC or USDT. You know, so giving them a choice of 2 or 3 different options in which they're able, via Express or Hero Wallet, you know, to be able to pay for the BTC name. And then I actually feel like that fee shouldn't be burnt. I actually feel like that should be part of the BNS DAO's treasury to be able to use for marketing and other initiatives to be able to promote BNS and ultimately, obviously, increase adoption of BNS and stacks. You know, at the moment, obviously, that stacks, you know, the stacks that is spent is burnt, isn't it, as a fee? So I actually feel like that could be used by the BNS DAO to further, you know, further the progress of BNS and obviously its growth and adoption.
Yeah, there's 3 separate like features here, which I think are all super interesting, and I think I would generally agree with all of them, but they are separate. It's, should we change kind of like the core price of .btc with the assumption that it may be too low? Then it's, should we, you know, set pricing in a different currency, whether it's SAT or USD? And then it's, should we not burn registration fees and instead distribute them in some way that can like be reinvested in the community? The third one I think is the trickiest because it makes a lot of sense to me, but then it requires answering, okay, how do we determine like who's on the BNS DAO? Like, for, you know, right now it's not like a true DAO in the sense of like there's a token that has governance and the voting and a committee and all this sort of thing. And so, you know, doing that means we need to launch BNS token, which means we need to figure that whole thing out, which is like, it's a big thing. And so I'm not saying that it's not a good idea, but like, you know, there's many steps to get there. And so if it's really important, you know, to many, then it just kind of means that's something additional we need to kind of figure out.
Yeah. Just a quick add on there. Like, I think I mentioned in the chat, like, I think it's actually 4 issues, which is like, do we need a DAO? Because, and I'm not like saying we do or we don't, to be clear, like I don't have a strong opinion there, but kind of to your point, Hank, like if we do collect the money, we could give it to just a single person. That obviously sounds risky for a number of reasons. So then it's like, do we need a DAO for that to go to so that it can be distributed? And then who will actually control the treasury of the DAO? And so like it does open a lot of questions. Now, I would disagree that we need a token. You could probably just use NFTs, the BNS names themselves, to represent like some share of voting power, or just like, i.e., any stacks address that holds a name. But because of the system that we created with 1-to-1, we actually have created an unfair voting system, and so it's kind of like, once again, we're being hurt by this horrible design decision that was enacted. So it's kind of a tricky situation, and as a result, like, I'm not really sure how we like proceed. But I guess like all the takeaway from this entire call and from the most recent thing I said is that I don't think there's any advancement of BNS without figuring out what happens with the 1-to-1 or 1-to-many. Like, it doesn't make sense to do like a partial upgrade where we're launching a new contract that only has like a couple of minor upgrades, causing every builder to switch over to a new contract and then causing the builders to switch over to a new contract again, when we already have comps from other networks where they have all of this functionality and more. Like we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. We don't have to like figure out what could this look like from a design perspective. We really just need to figure out how do we build it from an engineering perspective. If we have debates about what should be included, we should figure those out and quickly. But I don't think that we should do this like piecemeal approach. Like Hank and Jeff have spent a ton of time on BNSX, and I think like it's a valiant effort, and I like to see some level of advancement here. But the reality is they're limited because it's just a wrapper on top, and ultimately it's not. It doesn't mean the work was for nothing, but it's not a great solution if we're being honest. Like it's a limited solution that does a few extra things in an attempt to fix a broken system. But really, like we just need to fix the broken system once and migrate, and then hope the Stacks network is here for us to see the fruits of all that work.
Ragnar, I'd like to ask, because I think while the desire for like a non-contentious upgrade is like sound, it'll be contentious whether this change is included or not, because then there will be others that say if it's not included, then I'm in disagreement, and so it's potentially off the table. And so I think like in principle the things you're saying around strong engineering, well tested, etc., are not disagreeable. I would ask like if you could, I don't know, just put some thought or writing into further defining that, because I don't think we're really in disagreement. I think it could potentially become in disagreement on the extent to it of like how much testing, like how do we determine this is tested, how do we actually kind of practically go forward. Does that sound okay?
I could, we could think about it, but I definitely, I appreciate that feedback, and I think there's some good things there. But generally, I think if someone wants to make a change, they need to code it and put it out there as open source and get it tested. But I'd be happy to, like, if someone starts to develop that, I can say, hey, what about this? What about that? But the onus is on the person who wants to make the change. That's always how open source software works.
Yeah, but I could, whip up something today and put it on testnet. Is that sufficient? And obviously it's not. And so it's like, and I think because you would say it's not. And so, that's where I would say the onus comes back to you, where obviously it's not completely on you, but yeah, does that make sense?
Well, so I think whoever wants to make this change is going to have to code it either way, right? And so let's get that code written. Let's just say 100% of people said, yes, we want that change. We still have to have the code to test and just see from a practical point of view, right? So whatever it is that is thought of as the implementation to do what this is, then that should just be written regardless, and then go from there, I think.
Yeah, and it's about consensus, really, at the end of the day, isn't it? And in essence, really, consensus will decide whether this gets implemented or not, or what features get implemented. But I think we need to just try and, I guess, kind of not get too bogged down in, some of these contentious issues and, problems and things that people are finding, and, just kind of just get back to the fact that, this is something that is really going to help BNS for the future. It's going to help adoption. It's going to help bring just the average user on board. As Mark was saying, the non-techie, the non-technical, so average person that just wants to use Stacks and use the dApps and just get onboarded, get their names, have everything in one place. But yeah, like I say, it's about consensus. Ultimately that for me has to be the reason, the thing that decides, kind of like how BNS moves forward, not just a small handful, small group of people.
One quick idea, because I know we are way over on time, but what if we do because if we do view the current system as sound, then we should assume that that system is capable of voting on something because it's a sound system. If that's the case, why don't we just do an on-chain vote and see if there is some semblance of consensus to proceed in principle on this? And if I can only speak for myself and for Gamma, of course, and that's the beauty of decentralization and consensus, is that you just need individuals that are separate to agree enough that the majority have agreed to it and have adopted it. And so if we did a vote, that from my perspective, I'd feel comfortable saying, okay, this is what the people of the network actually want. And so we would just stop integrating BNS v1 on Gamma and we'd integrate BNS v2 because we wouldn't want to go against the will of the people, so to speak. Hank, I don't want to put work on you, but since you guys have been leading up some of the other efforts, how would you feel about doing a vote where basically if you hold a BNS name under the current system, you can vote in favor or against this, and then provided that people agree in principle, then we basically just deploy the new contracts and start integrating them. And if the majority of apps that use them integrate with them, that effectively is a new consensus and would show that really everyone wanted to be on the new system. And if apps like Gamma look at that contract and we say, no, this contract is improperly designed or it has bugs, we're not going to integrate that. Like Hank knows, the rest of you on this call might not know, but Hank knows we delayed integrating BNSX on Gamma by about a month and a half because there were some scalability issues with the API. So it's not like we're just willy-nilly doing these things. We want to make sure it's a good and sound solution, but it ultimately is what people want. I think it's what people want. So that's why I'd love to see a vote confirming that on chain.
A vote specifically what?
A vote basically in favor of some set of changes, including the one-to-many change.
I think you're getting way ahead of yourself. I think we got to test software first to see if it even works. I agree to that, and then someone just writes a contract and say, hey, this was it. This is what you wanted. This is the feature. When no, they need to vote on the actual implementation that can be tested.
It's two steps.
Start with the software and then test it and then see consensus. You can't start with features and then they're implemented.
No, we agree. I want to be clear. I'm sorry if I wasn't explicit. We totally agree. I'm saying I'm just proposing make it even more ensure a first level of consensus before we even think about proposing a technical solution. Step one is it's almost like if I said to you Ragnar, do you support the death penalty or something? And you say, yes, I do, or no, I don't. Well, first, before I talk about the methods of euthanasia or something, I'm going to first make sure that there is a general agreement that we would like to try to find a solution to proceed with this. And so I'm saying step one is let's figure out if this is actually what the network wants. Now, if we find that it is what the network wants, let's propose a technical solution, because everything has a cost. Builders need to invest a lot of time. And I don't think it's fair to ask Hank and Jeff to volunteer their time to build 10 different solutions. That's not a reasonable request. So I think step one is, do the people want this in general, in theory? Then here is a practical solution. And if enough people agree that that practical solution is worth adopting, that is what achieves actual consensus in terms of software.
I disagree. If someone wants to make a new contract, build it, let people test it, and then go from there, not the other way around. That doesn't make sense. Create the software that you want. Don't tell people like, do you want this? Like, that doesn't matter. Just build what you want and then go from there.
I think Ragnar, you're just basically you're repeating how Bitcoin typically works, right? Like, somebody comes up with an idea of SegWit, they fork it, they send a pull request to it, there's debate ensues, and then there's like then sort of like all the sides get out, and then there's like okay, we're gonna have a miners proposal, a voting mechanism, and then like if like that mechanism. I think that's what you're saying, right, Ragnar?
Yeah.
I totally. I mean, like I that's how Bitcoin works. But like, I also don't see I don't see why there's any reason that you can't take a survey of like BNS holder.
It's like a non-binding survey.
Don't call it like a vote, call it like
Yeah.
a survey. Because I mean, if you ultimately think about how consensus works, right? Like the practical way consensus works on this network of BNS is that like there are a couple people that run resolvers, right? Like Nick's probably one of them, right? Hero's one of them. And if they decide to point their resolvers to a new contract, that consensus has changed. Like everybody that has like an economic node has now changed, right? So like that's and so what these actors are saying, I hear Nick saying is like he's like, look, we don't want to have that power, and we're like voluntarily giving that to like we're gonna act in like how we think that people that own these names like who are not running nodes, they should be running nodes, but they're not, right? We're gonna act based on like that information, and we're not going to just unilaterally decide, because like we don't have like, I mean, ideally we want everybody to run their own resolver and validator, but we're not anywhere close to that.
Yeah, I agree, Larry. Got to run, but so maybe we can continue this conversation. But in general, like SegWit, people didn't, they didn't first tell people, hey, do you want SegWit, right? Like they didn't take a vote on that. The developers just started to build it. They obviously are explaining.
Absolutely. I mean, they actually did, because it was announced here in Hong Kong. So what they did is they came to a conference and they gave a talk about it, and then they got feedback from everybody in the conference. Oh, this is a good idea. If everybody in the conference said this was horrible, it would not have gotten written.
Yeah. Ragnar, what's your issue
with the vote? I really have to go. I'm already late and we're over. So let's continue the conversation again in like 2 weeks, and we could asynchronously on the forum or whatever, just continue.
I'll put some notes on action items and we can go from there on the forum. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate your time and patience.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. Gotta go. Bye.
Bye.